4:20 tonight. We'll grab a car and take a carpool down to Southeastern and join in with their singing and worship tonight. If you'd like to come with us, just by 4:20, and we'll be at Southeastern at about 5 o'clock. Proverbs 4 in verse 23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." It's the wellspring of life. Most of my life, I've thought that this was kind of trying to tell me to limit the influences that condition my heart in destructive ways. You know, trying to just not watch any of those semi-pornographic movies, that passed for PG-13. All right? Reading less news and more Bible. Pouring into my consciousness good music, healthy food, positive relationships. And most of all of that is correct, but I want to reflect on this business of guarding the heart today. Guarding the heart. Why? Because it's the wellspring. The heart is that place from which everything else flows. Our actions flow from that emotive center. Are you with me here? That emotional center, not the intellect. Jesus says, "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, out of his gut," right? It's that visceral part of us, right? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Yeah? Luke 6:45. Much of what Christians have tried to do over the last 300 years is to try to educate the mind. Are you with me here? It's a good thing. In many ways, that's what I'm doing right now, right? Trying to educate the mind. The mind is rational. It tries to follow arguments. It tries to break down problems into parts. It tries to collect together or synthesize new forms of information in new combinations so that we can make a plan. But none of that really gets deep enough to what takes place in the heart. And the heart is the wellspring of what motivates us. Right? So you can know the names of the 12 disciples, but the heart may not want to follow. Yes? Am I making any sense today? All right. The heart sometimes, maybe most of the time, lives in the subconscious. It's doing all of its work and we're not even knowing it's doing all of its work. We're not thinking about it. It's down there doing the work. Right? We make decisions out of that visceral and primal and unexamined place. Yeah? Most people's hearts control what their minds think. So Christian education that is, directed towards the mind, while it's very good, is insufficient. It's insufficient. It's not enough. We have to look after and train not just the mind, but there we go, we got it. We have to look and train the heart. And training the heart happens differently than training the mind. being able to name those 12 disciples, right? Being able to name those fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5 will not necessarily produce love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control. Just because I can say the words, just because I might be able to define the concepts, does not mean that my heart wants to inhabit them. Yes? Some of you may be struggling with this integration of head and heart thing, right? Along with me, yeah? Psalm 119 and verse 11 speaks of hiding God's message in one's heart. Yeah? I've hidden your word in my heart, the psalmist says. How do we get the message there? How do we get it down there? How do we educate the heart? The Romantic movement in the early 19th century didn't think you needed to train the heart. Yeah, you just needed to listen to it. Yeah? Several years ago, I preached a funeral for a man who was 1 year behind me in school growing up. And, well, he would talk to me. And I would say, well, you know, I'm just having this real dilemma. I don't know exactly how I ought to handle this issue. And he would say things like, well, Kent, what's your heart telling you, man? What's your heart telling you, man? And I told about 200 of my peers that I grew up going to high school with that were grieving this guy. And I said, you know, the difference between Jay and me, the guy who had died, and me, maybe the biggest difference was that I never did trust my heart like Jay did. And I had my peers that day. I think that day was the day I really felt like a preacher for the first time. Because they knew that Jay had to, like in his brother's words, let his heart lead him into a relationship with a woman that Jay's brother said just repeatedly tormented his soul. They knew that Jay's heart had led him into addictions, that Jay's heart had led him throughout his life, and he didn't really ever mistrust his heart. But I got to tell you, I mistrust mine. Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. I mean, I don't mean to say that I'm a really terrible person. That's not the way the earth or the world means those kinds of things. That's not what I'm saying. Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things. The heart is deceitful. It's deceptive. Are you with me here? It's deceptive. And it's beyond cure. Who can understand it? And then God, through the prophet, assures us in the next verse, I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind. I don't know where everyone else is in this sanctuary this morning. I really don't know where you are in your life, and there are no hidden messages here. But all of us at some point need the Lord to tell us, and it does take God in our hearts to tell us when our heart is just being stupid. Jeremiah says the heart is beyond cure. It's beyond cure. What's he mean by that? I think what he means, maybe take this with a grain of salt, but I think what he means is your mind can't correct it. You can't just tell your heart, quit thinking that, quit wanting that, right? You know, I can tell myself, I don't really want that blue foreign-made convertible. But on one of these sunny days that are about 65, 70 degrees, I kind of do want that foreign-made deep blue convertible. Yeah? My heart just wants it. And you can't just make your heart quit wanting it by saying, stop it, Kent. Right? Are you with me? So, we have this fissure between head and heart. We're not loving God with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength as if all of those things were aligned and loving God alike. Yes? You thinking through this with me? So Jeremiah says it's beyond cure. The prophet Ezekiel in chapter 36 and verse 26 promises Israel that God would renew His covenant with the whole nation that has had a heart problem for quite a number of generations. God would renew the covenant. I will give you a new heart, right? He says. I will give you a new heart and I'll put a new spirit in you. And I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and to be careful to keep my laws. I know your heart longs for gods of stone, right? I know that there are idols in your heart and you want things that you shouldn't want, that you want things that are dead, but I'm going to replace that with not a heart of stone, but a heart of flesh that's living, and I'm going to put my spirit in the middle of that flesh so that you want to do what you know you ought to do. Isn't that wonderful? And when the covenant was renewed in Jesus Christ, Paul wrote in Romans 5 and verse 5, hope doesn't put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given us. Yeah? That's what it takes. At least initially, right? Our baptism is not just about our forgiveness. It's about receiving God's Spirit. It's receiving God's energized presence to transform the heart. We don't just get dipped in water. We die to that old way of living and we're transformed and brought up out of the water, out of the grave, right? Into a new kind of dimension of life where God's Spirit lives in us and helps us to overcome what we couldn't otherwise. Yeah? So, is the solution to be baptized? Well, yes. But that's only the beginning. The decision to turn one's heart over to Christ is an essential beginning, but Joel 2 and verse 13 reminds us that you can enter into a ritual and your heart not yet be involved. Rend your heart and not just your garments, he says. Yes? Rend your hearts and not your garments. We know it's possible to go through rituals of grief and surrender without your heart really letting go of the things of this world. Am I right? Most of us have had imaginations formed not by Christ, but by the imagination of the world. The businesses around, I know that they're they're moving towards online stuff, but they still spend lots of money on those commercials. I've been watching NBA basketball recently. How many of you have been watching the NBA basketball commercials? I tried to tune them out, but you know they're pretty good. They kind of hook the imagination, right? Most of us have been formed by the imagination of the advertiser. Listen to Jesus again and think about how he's saying that our imaginative life reinforces and forms our heart. Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, your heart will be also." Where you think real gain is, what you imagine, right? I got to just tell you, this is I'm not preaching this as a rule for anybody else. I'm just telling you how I respond to it in my spirit. I can't stand these commercials for FanDuel and sports betting. I think ultimately all that is a kind of monetary porn. I want to fantasize about making big money without contributing anything. Yeah? I want to have an ecstatic experience of knowing myself as just somehow suddenly wealthy without putting anything into the economy to help anybody else. I just want to suck it all out and have it fall on me magically, and I want to fantasize about that and get really excited about it. And that's the reason more and more people do, you know the lottery. I'm proud to say I've never bought a lottery ticket. Quentin bought me a lottery ticket for his birthday. And his mother said, "You give him that one, he's going to win." I don't know what it is. So I start doing, how do I do this? And he says, just scratch off the sevens. Yeah, there's $1. There's $1. Oh, what's this 777 thing? It's a 777. Quentin says, that means that you got a triple score. That means you got a $3 ticket. That means I'm now $13 ahead on this Indiana State Lottery. Right? But the concept is, the ritual of buying those, right, it's fun. Why is it fun? Because I'm going to fantasize about hitting it big. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Yeah? And so it's trying the imagination, right? Jesus is trying to get us to think about the imagination. For where the treasure is, there your heart will be also. The light of the body is the eye. And if therefore your eye is pure, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is evil, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? If what you're focusing on imaginatively has got a lens to it that is focusing and filtering out the good and seeking worldly riches, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. How then do we train the heart and the heart's imagination? You know, see, this is the $50 question, right? Prompted by the gift of the Spirit, our mind sometimes has to tell our heart no. That's point number one. The grace that has appeared teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled lives. Titus 2:11. Some passions can be transformed by just starving them. If you like your kind and you like to stick to your kind and you don't want any of the other kind, you know how that can be transformed? By God putting you in a church with all different kinds. And if you get stuck with a church with all different kinds who love you and consistently love you and you're commanded to love them, guess what? Over time, you can learn to like other people who are different. You can learn that. Now, not all human passions are as easily transformed as that. Sometimes you're just a selfish person. How many of you are just, at times, selfish people? And you know, I've been trying to be unselfish now for about 60 years. No, not quite 60 years. I haven't been conscious that long. About 59 years I've been trying. They've been trying to tell me that I'm not the center of the universe, but my heart hasn't quite been fully convinced. With me? And so most of us are going to have to struggle with this persistent selfishness or persistent elements of pride or fear or worry, right? That just aren't banished by telling it no. But telling it no is important. Most of you, or some of you at least, are too young to remember Windows 3.1. You remember? You're old enough to remember Windows 3.1, Aaron? When that computer got kind of messed up and it wanted to lock up, you could go to an emergency kind of pared down operating system, right? In previous versions, you could open it up and just use DOS commands, and you could make the computer work typing in manual DOS commands. And that's sort of how I think about telling your flesh and your heart no. In an emergency, that's the best you got, because you've got to save your life right now, right? And so that emergency operating system went into work, and it would try to save the entire computer by just paring it down and telling the rest of the computer what it had to do, because it was set aside. And this was the one little thing that was going to dictate what was going to happen. Yeah, obviously, Brother Ben, I'm not a computer scientist, and this is not my metaphor, but I think you get the idea that when you tell your flesh or your heart no, you're doing something in the moment that's absolutely essential. Yeah, because we live right now. And I can destroy my life right now. Right? My heart can do that. But beyond that, then, there are other kinds of things that are really important. You can start attending to your rituals. The heart is formed by ritual. You with me? Now, a ritual might be something as formal as going through the Lord's Supper, or it might be something as formal as putting on a little better clothes and coming and gathering with people on Sunday morning. But it might be something as mundane as every week I got to mow the yard. You know how much of my life is spent mowing the yard? Or doing the laundry? All right? Or waiting till about 3:30 to do the dishes because Amy's going to come home at 4 or 4:30. Right? I mean, these are kind of ritual behaviors, right? I got to do this, and you do it over and over again. And so that means that you may have to to kind of think about the way the rituals are forming your heart unconsciously. Right? You might have to start saying, well, no to certain kinds of melody. We might have to become aesthetically discerning, right? Now, this is challenging because we want to make all these matters of the heart just completely free form, as if there were no truth in the matters of the heart. And everything is just a matter of your own personal opinion in matters of the heart. We know that that's not true in matters of the mind, but we haven't quite figured out yet that matters of the heart have a real truth to them too. Right? It turns out, for instance, that all babies from all cultures respond similarly or almost alike to scary or dark or angry music. No words. Even if they had words, they wouldn't understand the words yet. But they do understand the music. They're disturbed. It turns out that melody is not just in the ear of the beholder. Melody actually carries with it emotional content. So David could play on his harp and soothe Saul's rage. And today's composers know how to stoke it. The spirits know to the malformed heart is going to have to involve discernment about melody, right? It's going to have to involve you deciding what is the appropriate kind of melody for me to listen to. And saying yes to some and no to others. Melody speaks to the heart. It can change your mood, right? Amy and I used to go into the rental property after the renters had trashed it. And boy, we had no energy. And we'd put on some music, you know. And before long, what are we doing? Well, we're working hard. We're going to go get this thing. And we're going to tackle this problem. Why? Because the melody is doing its work. It's not as if we said, man, I've just got to change my mood. Rationally, I know no, we put on music, and the music did the work while we weren't even thinking about it. You with me? Some melody is frivolous. Some melody is meditative. Some is light-hearted. Some is profound. And yes, that emotional content is carried by the melody and the harmonic structure of the music, not just your reaction to it. And so it is not, I'm sorry, just your own preference. Melody has content, and if you're going to train your heart, you have to start developing something akin to what snooty people call taste. Now, I know snooty people get kind of, you know, they want all the complexities and all. I'm not talking about that. You have to make an ethical discernment about how the melody that you're playing is forming your heart, right? Amy doesn't like for me to do this, but I go straight to the most profane and difficult example. No one sings the Sanctus, Holy, 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 to the tune of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. It is wrong to sing the Sanctus to Old MacDonald Had a Farm. It destroys your heart. Holy, 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 holy. No. That destroys the capacity of the heart to grasp what is holy. How do you educate the heart? It has something to do with attending to the kind of ritual that you engage in. Yeah? Do you ritually say, I'm sorry? Do you ritually say, thank you? There are all kinds of ritual actions, right? And if we start attending to the rituals, we will start attending to how our heart is being unconsciously formed. We attend to our relationships, yes? One of the things that I've always struggled with is to try to help people see that what is formative about church is more about the relationships than it is about the content of what we talk about here. Yeah? So it's not as if you can just live church by just, I wonder what that message is trying to tell me in terms of an information for my life, right? Can I get some helpful hints on how to live my life at church? Well, that's a good thing. I'm not against that. Lord knows I'm not against educating the mind, right? Cindy knows I'm not against educating the mind. She gets frustrated with how much I emphasize it, right? But I want to emphasize that when we cultivate relationships where we're challenging one another, but we're forgiving one another, and we're learning to bear with one another. You know, I don't just decide I'm going to be a patient person. I can't do that. My will is not strong enough to be a patient person. I need to have to practice that, right? You know how I learned how to control my tongue? I got up at 6 o'clock, or got up and had to be at work at 6 o'clock and teach school all day, right? And I was for 7 periods with kids, and I had an administration that was holding me accountable for the way I talked to children. And I went from there home, finished up my training homework, and then I went to church. And I did that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Friday, I got a little reprieve. But you know what I did? I started studying for my Sunday sermon that I was going to preach on Sunday. Yeah? I might get a little relief on Saturday. I would go play golf. But I learned pretty quick it was a whole lot easier to not throw my driver down the 7th fairway if I was playing with the elders of the church. In other words, patience is communally learned. It's learned by bearing with people. If you have to bear with me all over and over again, it will make Amy patient. I keep praying that I will have that effect, right? I keep praying that she will have that effect on me, that we will make us patient together. No? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not nearly as impatient as I used to be. I have a lot more resilience because of having to put up with my family. And my family having to put up with me. Yeah? I learn forgiveness when I'm being forgiven. I learn all of these things, and it's not that I'm trying to learn them. The heart is not trying to do it. It's just happening because I'm attending to rituals and relationships. And then ultimately the realm of the imagination. rituals, relationships, and the realm of the imagination. What kind of poetry do I read? What kind of novel do I read? What kind of thing do I put in the head? And what kind of thing guides the way I dream? What is it that I'm worrying about? What is it that pops up in my dreams? What's the fodder for the heart to be doing its work? What are the images, right? When I was a boy, I would wake up from a dream because all day I'd been marching with one of those old muskets. It fired a cork. If it had a cap, it would fire a cork, and I would march all over the pasture, and I was killing redcoats. Right? Imagination gets formed in certain ways. Yeah? You dream about it. What am I putting in there? And so these rituals and these relationships and the way that we feed our imagination, this is the long-term way that God shapes the heart and we educate the heart. And so we go through rituals together and we do things together and we learn with relationship and ritual and this realm of the imagination to have our heart transformed. Above all things, church, above all things, guard the heart because it's the wellspring of life. So attend to your rituals, attend to your relationships, and attend to that realm of the imagination as we stand and sing.